From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. Few experiences contribute more strongly to a sense of pessimism than feeling like we are stuck. Whether that's a difficult relationship, challenges with our family, or a dead-end job, it's difficult to feel like we have no options. My Blue Sky guest today faced many of these challenges, but rather than come to a stop at that dead end, she did a U-turn. And she spent much of her life since trying to help others do the same. As you'll soon hear, Tricia Rose Burt grew up in a household where there was a right way and a wrong way to do things. Study hard, go to a good school, act like a lady, and do the right things. Tricia did all of these things, only to discover that they were leaving her feeling miserable. It was only when she discovered her more creative and artistic side that she began to thrive as a person. She left her promising career in public relations to go to art school, and everything changed from there. She went on to tell the story of her artistic transformation on The Moth, as well as a one-woman show by the same great name, How to Draw a Naked Man. And yes, that's naked, spelled N-E-K-K-I-D. When not on stage, Tricia teaches the power of storytelling and hosts the terrific podcast, No Time to Be Timid. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Tricia Rose Burt as much as I did. Tricia Rose Burt, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's fun to have you on, and I'd like to start. I see your story in large part as one of transformation, and your upbringing and the path that was setting you on is very different from where you are winding up. So let's start at the easy beginning, easy part to start. Tell me about your upbringing, what that was like, where you were raised, and how you were raised.
Okay. I'll try to do that as quickly as possible. So I was raised in Tampa, Florida. And I was raised by a mother who was from a very small town in Tennessee called Munford, Tennessee, that had about 600 people in it. And so, my father was very, like there was a right way and there was a wrong way. I mean, it was a very clear prescribed path, right? Not a lot of risk taking happening there. And really, it was just very clear that you didn't venture far off that path. I mean, I did a one-woman show some time ago, and part of it I had a section that was like the shoulds that I was raised with. There's like 30 of them, and people in the audience would just nod their head because they all had the same one. Yeah. But it was like, I should be appropriate. I should be, be sensible. I should act like a lady. I should, there were all, I should go to church. I should vote a particular way, and none of that included going to art school.
Right.
Right. And so, when I started making different choices, which happened because I was just miserable. I mean, I'd done everything I was supposed to do. And I'm like, why am I so unhappy here? And, I looked like, I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I looked like everybody else, but, I was like, this is just not going to do. This is just not going to do.
Yeah. And I learned a lot about you from your various speeches, including at The Moth, where you had one of the great Moth titles, How to Draw a Naked Man. And we'll talk about that.
I know. Make sure you say naked, because that's the key there.
I think I said it right. N-E-K-K-I-D, if you're wondering how to spell that. So you were working in PR, public relations, which has some creative parts to it, I suppose, and pitching and how you write and stuff like that. But
if you squint real hard.
Yeah, right. But you were kind of, the clients weren't really doing it for you. And somehow, how did you find this itch or realize what the itch was that you needed to scratch and decide to go into more creative pursuits?
I think it happened Really, so, so I went to the right university, and I came home and I was, working in PR, and I was getting kinda cranky then, and I at the time I was dating a man who was an art director, which was like, "Ooh, that's very interesting." He was the creative one and I was sort of the business one, and he moved to New York and I followed him to New York and did all my PR stuff in New York. And then I moved to Boston with him. At this point, we're married. And I hated PR, but I just kept applying for PR jobs because I didn't know what else to do. I literally didn't know what else to do. It's like, I hate what I'm doing, but it's all I know how to do. So let me keep trying to. I mean, I was just totally in a rut. And so I went to this career counselor and she was very clear and said, um, you need to work on your own, not for anybody else. You need a tremendous amount of flexibility, and I was billing my time in 15-minute increments this entire time. Like just, you couldn't be more, constrained. And then she said, and you need to be in the arts. And I was like, who are you talking about? I don't even know who you're talking about. And so I left with that information and went and accepted a job as a director of corporate communications at a financial services firm because completely the opposite of what she told me to do because I just couldn't process that she was saying I was this completely different person than I thought I was. But it just stuck with me. And so I ended up going to art school. I just took an art school class. It was called Artist Process at the School of Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I went in that summer thinking this is kind of a once-off thing, and I'll probably end up going to business school or whatever, and left that summer applying to art school and getting in. And it just completely 360, 180, whatever it is.
Amazing. And as you look back, I suppose when you were a kid, in elementary school, you took art classes, you did that sort of thing. Was there any spark back then, or did you just sort of come up and to completely
Oh,
surprise
dear
you?
God. I don't mean to step on you, but
No.
I have a poster that I think I did maybe when I was 8 years old, and it says, "Please come see me in a play this Thursday at 1 p.m., Tricia Burt." And I decorated it, and I thought, "Nothing has changed." I mean, it's like a little over 50 years later, I'm still trying to get people to come see me in a show. But I was 8 years old and took about a 40-year detour after I wrote that. But, there's a certain point where you can be really creative as a kid, and then suddenly you need to fit in, and then suddenly it's okay, you've done that. Now it's time to go
Yeah.
do something logical,
Right, right, right. Yeah, and you talked about being raised in an overachieving household. You had a great quote, and I think it was in The Moth, where you said, "If there are no grades, how will I know if I'm overachieving?" and and art can be that way too. You don't get an A necessarily on this, right?
No,
It's
you
very
do not get an
subjective.
A.
Someone's going to like it, someone's going to hate it, but what I think you're finding is the achievement is in your own fulfillment, and that's not an easy thing for people to understand.
No, and I mean, it's not like I'm not ambitious. I am, I have ambition, but I think what I've really had to focus on is just the process of making. And I'm not in charge of the outcome. I can do the best that I can possibly do, but I don't know whether someone's going to like it, pick it up. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I have to, you know, tell the story I want to tell using the medium that works best for me, and get, try to hone my craft and I can put as much as I can into of what I can control into
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And then you just got to put it out in the world and see what happens.
I've heard that mindset used even in athletic pursuits too, and I think it goes back to the Stoics, and Ryan Holiday talks about this. Focus on the process, not the outcomes. The outcomes are often completely out of your control, especially when the outcomes are being judged by other people, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like that's what you're finding in art, that, block out all that other stuff, block out all the shoulds that you were raised with, and focus on what this is doing for you in the process.
Yeah. And I mean, plus the fun's in the process. It's no fun to say, I made a one woman show. It's fun to say, I'm working on my next one. That's what's fun to say,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. And okay, so you do so tell us what the range of things that you're doing now, because you do your own artwork, you are doing like you said, one woman show. Believe you're still standing up and telling stories and that sort of thing. And you're also helping other people get on the path that you're on. So let's talk about what Tricia Rose Burt is up to these days when she's no longer doing PR for clients that bore her.
And we all breathed a sigh of relief when that was over.
Yes, yes.
But having said that, I learned so much in the PR when I was in PR. And they would walk up to you and say, "Can you be smart about concrete in 30 minutes?" I'm like, "Well, yes, I can." You know what I mean? So, I got really good at being fast on my feet, So there's some important things I learned. I learned how to write well and write quickly and write efficiently. And so, I look back and go, "Whoa, and plus it gave me great material moving on." So anyway, but now when I focus on a couple of things right now. I've got my own stories that I'm kind of sorting out, trying to tell. If I do any visual work now, it's just for me. It's just to keep my hands moving. I don't show my work anymore. It's not in, any galleries or anything like that. I make it for me, right? Just fussing, making my hands move. So I'm really focusing on what stories I want to tell. And I help I work with executives. I work with anybody who really needs to help um, really learn how to tell a story. There's an art and craft to telling a story. And I can go down that whole road real quick. But there's a difference between an anecdote and a story. An anecdote, there's no change. A story, something has changed. You have changed somewhere in your emotional journey. You've somehow changed internally, and those can be very powerful stories if you're trying to raise money or you know motivate people to take an action, move people to take an action. People want to be moved, and story is the best way to do that, right? Story is the very best way to do that. So I've worked with nuns, I've worked with private equity firms, just the gamut of people who want to learn how to tell a story better.
As a dutiful daughter, Tricia Rose Burt lived in ways that her parents believed to be appropriate and sensible. Pursuing the arts made her feel more like her true self, though. And after getting over her concern that if there are no grades, how will I know if I'm overachieving, she settled into a fulfilling practice of focusing on the process and not the outcomes. The optimistic side of Tricia helped her have gratitude for the career she left, being thankful for the lessons she learned while working in PR. And today she's thriving in her new career with one of the more diverse range of clients from, as she says, nuns to private equity firms. Now, getting back to our blue sky conversation, Tricia will tell us more about the show that she hosts.
I have this podcast that I do. It's called No Time to Be Timid, which every time I'm wimping out about something, a friend of mine will go, there's this podcast about like No Time to Be Timid. I'm like, I just quit throwing it back at me. And that's so much fun because I like giving people a platform to tell their stories. How did they get, because I need to hear courageous stories. I need courage regularly. So I just figure out people I want to talk to and say, "Hey, come be on my show." And I was nervous. This is a little bit of divergent, but for your listeners who go like, "I do this for a living. I can't really pivot and do something else." I was nervous about whether or not I was going to be a good interviewer because I was the one on stage, right? And I'm like, "Am I going to be good like listening to somebody?" And then I realized when you teach storytelling, all you do is ask questions and listen. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be good at this." But I didn't, so it was interesting for me not to know that about myself. So, it's kind of when you take an inventory of what you're good at, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize I was good at that." Oh, or it could move from one place to another, right?
I love the title, No Time to Be Timid. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. When you say no time to be timid, are you saying this is no time to be timid? In other words, versus there's no time in the day to be timid. Are you talking to people at a certain life stage where you say this is no time to be timid? Or tell me what's behind that title?
Yes to all of those.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think I first started doing it. I mean, I went to art school in my mid 30s. I got on stage like my late 40s, 50. I started a podcast at 62. It's like, you know, don't doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Right.
It just doesn't make a difference, just so there's no time. And also, I know this sounds like a heavy word, but I know the pain of not being creative. I know the pain of being in a life that is not the life you're supposed to be in. I know what it's like to feel like you don't have options, but you actually do. But you're coming with all these reasons why you can't. So so that it's like there's like stop it. There's no time to, stop it and find that courage or surround yourself. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people be more brave so that if they see, well, that person did it and they were either this old or I mean, I just have there's a chef on my show this week, Devin Finnegan. She's she's an amazing chef in Aragosta. Her restaurant's in Maine,
Yeah.
and
Classic. Yeah.
she never went to culinary school. And her restaurant was just named, number 2 by Food and Wine in the country. So it's like just don't put obstacles in your way. You know, there's enough anyway. Don't put them in there
Yeah.
yourself.
Right. No, and it's great advice because, like you said, you said earlier, I wasn't sure I'd be a good interviewer because I tell stories. And a lot of people say, well, I don't know if I could do this, or I'm not sure I could do this. There's only one way to find out.
Just do it, man.
You gotta try. And now I'm sure you come up against people and people listening to this might say, well, that's all well and good, but I got to make a living. I've got to stay in this job I don't like. And it's kind of where you were in PR probably, because I got bills to pay. What do you say to people who listen to this and say that?
Well, I'm sort of a cautionary tale because I literally in 1 week I quit my job, sold my car, divorced my husband. Of course, that had been in the works for a while. Um, sold off everything and moved to Ireland, where I lived for 4 years, and made this very dramatic, like I need a new life, and did it. It made perfect sense at the time. I would do it all over again. Is that the easiest way to do it? No. No. So I would encourage people to work creativity into their life, to not make it be so compartmentalized. I can only be a writer after I finish being an investment banker. It's like, how can you work writing into your investment banking world? Or how can you find more of a balance so you kind of don't reach the point that I did, which was like everything is wrong. I have to bail. I mean, it was right for me. It was the right thing to do. It was a hard way to do it. And so there are the realities. I mean, it's hard to create if you have a revenue gun to your head. It is very hard to do that. And so my husband and I have created a life where we have a very low overhead. We don't have, it's a low overhead so that there isn't a huge amount of financial pressure. So that, I mean, we have a mortgage, with that kind of stuff that you have, but but we've made a conscious decision to streamline our life so that we can be the creative people we want to be. Now, I have clients because, if it was up to me, I'd be sitting in my studio all day long making stuff and just writing stories. But I have clients. I have to, so, but I now have a list of, I am now doing revenue generating work that is in line with my mission, right? It's not completely, divorced from what I love to do and what I'm good at doing.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think you said something important too about it doesn't have to be this either or. I've known people who have wound up writing full books by spending an hour a day or early first thing in the day or last thing in the day, scratching that itch, learning about it, taking an online writing course on the side. One of my favorite novelists, Amor Towles, I think that's how he pronounced it, or Amor, who wrote Gentleman in Moscow. He was an investment banker, I want to say, worked in finance till his 40s, and quit. His first book, I think, was Rules of Civility, which is amazing. And then Gentleman of Moscow, to me, is about as well written as any novel I've ever read. And very much mid-career, total change. And now he's one of the most successful. So it's never too late.
It's never too late. And people do it differently. I mean, I started telling stories and getting on stage. I was 48, and mine happened when it was for some of my visual work. I had a big show of my visual work, and instead of an artist talk, I'm like, I don't want to say like I use Stonehenge and I have graphite. I was like, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I was like, can I do this? Can I do this performance piece? And they're like, sure. And so I did this performance piece, right? And it started out as one thing, but I worked on that thing for years, and it ended up being something different than when it started. But so for me, I was doing income generating work and writing that one-woman show at the same time. Like, you just do what you have to do. Some people can have one career, save up enough money, stop, and then go do the art career they've always wanted. So it just what's right for you, what works for you.
And I think too, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have. When I'm doing more creative work, it's not as exhausting as doing work that you're not meant to do. You're not swimming upstream as much. I've had times where I've met my word quota writing or something, and I whistle for the next hour because this sense of accomplishment.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. It's just filling up your well, man. I mean,
Yeah,
and
it's different.
it's just, it also depends on the kind of work I'm doing. I mean, I can do visual work for a while, and I swear it feels like I've been praying for like 2 weeks, because I'm in a zone. It's bigger than me. I can get out of my way, and I'm just, time passes. You don't know it's passing. I get my most energy in the world when I'm in front of people. I mean, I just that's the best place in the world for me to be. Other people are horrified. It's the best place in the world for me to be. And when we're in those zones of where we're supposed to be, if time flies, we get so much energy. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that about public speaking. I also do public speaking, and it's like my favorite thing in the world. And you may have this personality too. I don't know. But for me, I describe it to people as if there's a ballroom full of 1,000 people who I don't know, I would rather give a speech to them than mingle. And it's like not even close.
Absolutely.
Tricia's podcast title sums up well what she hopes we'll all come to believe, with optimism, that this is no time to be timid. She acknowledges that while a career in the arts is not in the cards for all of us, we should all try to think of ways to bring more creativity into our lives. And I agree with her from my own limited experience that flexing your creative muscles can indeed, as she puts it, fill up your well. Next, Tricia tells us what this can feel like by describing helping a client with a business presentation.
I was working with a client, and I was getting them ready for an investors conference. And I was sitting with them. I started at 10 in the morning, and I ended at 6:30. And all these people were coming in, and I was looking at their presentations and helping them tell stories. At the end, 6:30, I'm like, "We got any more? We're ready to go." Because I was helping people be their best selves telling a story. And it was like somebody gave me an IV shot of just a whole bunch of sugar. I mean, I was just ready to go. It just, because I was doing something I love to do. So, it really does. I had just spent too long doing something I hated, and I'm like, I'm never doing that again. And so it took me a long time to kind of build it up again, where, where I have, an income generating stream of work I love. It took me a long time to get to that place. But it was worth everything it took me to get here.
I love it. And so I found in my research,
what?
This is right up there on the website. The No Time to Be Timid Manifesto.
Oh yes.
Which I love. And I don't know if we'll get to all 10, but I'd like to go through that with you because there are people listening who are probably responding positively to a lot of what you said, but they might be feeling that timidity sneaking in. So you have 10 things here in your manifesto. And the first, I love the way you put this, the riskiest thing you can do is play it safe. Why is it risky to play it safe? Sounds oxymoronic.
Because if you're like me, you'll be miserable. I mean, it's like I did everything. I did the safe path, and then my life blew up when I was 33. It just blew up, because that safe path was just like strangling me. It was, because I think in the safe, for me, the safe path, there was no self expression. There was no room for curiosity. There wasn't a lot of room for creative expression. And so I was doing everything I was supposed to do. But that was not what I was made for.
Yes. And I think we've already covered this, but I'll read it. There's more than one right way in life. You were raised being told there was one right way.
Yes. Yeah.
And you discovered there wasn't, which relates closely to 3. Don't expect a linear path.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, I look back on jobs I've had and I'm like, really? Like, or experience. I mean, it's, I had a spiritual counselor one time say to me, God writes straight with crooked lines. And which I love. I mean, you don't know where you're going to end up. I try to say, make a thoughtful yes. When there's an opportunity to go, well, yeah, I hadn't thought about that one. Well, maybe we ought to go in that direction, and
Yeah. And I think a lot of, I often sort of went against the grain on career advice too, where people say, sit down and map out your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. And it's like, it's not going to go that way. And you might not want it to go that, like in your case, I look back on my career and there's no way I would have said, I'm going to do this. And then out of the blue, I'm going to do this. And then if I never would have planned that out. And frankly, the fact that I didn't, I tell people, if you like the job you're in, do the job you're in as well as you can. Work with people you respect. And once that's not happening, try something else. And it's not going to be linear. Don't expect it to be. So I'm with you on that.
Well, plus the other thing is, my father had the same job forever, and that doesn't happen anymore. And it doesn't happen anymore. And that's great in the sense of you can kind of whatever you're curious about, follow that curiosity.
Right.
You know.
And number 4 hits at something I'm sure people are thinking when they hear you speak. Creativity is not a frivolous pursuit. Elaborate on that, please.
Well, I was raised that logic was the right thing. Everything had to be logical, and that, I mean, it's not like it's not like I don't apply logic to what I do, but that's not the only thing involved in leading a life. There has to be creative thinking involved in what, I mean, if you're starting a business, if you're making a painting, I mean, there's got to be a blend of creativity and logic. There just has to be. And so I mean, I was just always, oh, that's just, it was a lesser skill set. It was just a lesser skill set. I mean, it was analysis, it was logic, it was math, it was things that, you could measure, things you could measure. And, but creativity is at the heart of everything.
Yeah. What I think you get that a lot in for young people, and you experience this when they're, say, going to school and picking their college major, and they write home or call home and say, hey, I'm going to major in art, or I'm going to major in philosophy, and the eyes roll and it's like, I'm paying all this money and you're gonna, and I think a concern I have is that pressure is only getting more intense as especially higher education has gotten so ridiculously expensive that people start looking, what's the ROI going to be on this education? If you're not an econ major or going pre-law or pre-med, you're wasting your time. I think that's a really dangerous precedent.
It is.
Yeah, and it's a path we're headed on.
I majored in communications. At the time, it was an interdisciplinary major, and it was very vague. Also, my boyfriend was majoring in communications, so I thought, okay, I'll do that. But also part of it was, I mean, I didn't make my own decision until I was 30, just to be clear. But I was a good Southern girl doing what everybody told me to do. But but it also, it was very vague. I didn't feel like I was committing to anything because I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Just had no idea. I really didn't know what I was supposed to do until I was in my mid-30s.
So I think we've probably covered logic can work against you and practicality is overrated. I love 7. Number 7 is constraints are opportunities. Talk about that one, please.
So the first thing I think of is when I went over to Ireland. It was the best thing I ever did. I got my soul when I was over there. The stupidest thing on paper and financially, but the smartest thing as far as my soul and my life. And I didn't have any money to make anything. And I couldn't go buy a bunch of oil paints. I couldn't do that. And so I started making work out of tea bags, used tea bags. And I would go this is before COVID and I had any sense of, of hygiene, but I would go to the sandwich shop and they would save all the used tea bags for me. Other people's tea bags. I know. Then I would dry them out and I would empty out all the insides of them. And then I would dip them in beeswax and sew them together. Or I would, yeah, it's amazing. They're beautiful. I mean, tea bags are beautiful. And so so for me, financial constraints have always been why I pick the materials I pick because art materials can be really expensive. And then if it's really expensive, then I feel like this has to be a really good painting because you know what I mean? It's too much pressure. So if you're working with masking tape, I did a whole series on masking tape. Masking tape didn't cost much. It's like, I don't know, $5 a roll or something. I mean, you can do whatever you, so for me, the financial constraint was very helpful. If you, even if you have a constraint, if you say to somebody, make something, it's like, where do you start? If you say make something that's 1 inch by 1 inch, you're like, oh, okay. Let me, that can it can they can constraints can prompt you. Um, a time constraint can prompt. I have a dear friend, Rachel Perry, and she started using very unconventional materials because she had a first grader and she didn't have time to sit around and wait for her oil paint to dry. And so she's using like aluminum foil and, fruit stickers. And she has some, she is a nationally, if not internationally known artist who does amazing work. But her constraint was I have a toddler and I cannot use certain materials because I just don't have the luxury of time.
I love constraints or opportunities for a number of reasons. You just described some. To me, it's kind of an optimistic point of view too, right? Instead of saying, "Well, I do, but I don't have enough time. Here we go again. I don't have enough this, that, or the other." I've also seen it in a business setting, and people listen to this know I used to work for Ted Turner, who was notoriously, I could say frugal, but he was cheap. They used to say he could squeeze Lincoln off a penny, but I am telling you, I am positive that helped us be more creative. That if we were rolling in budgets and had all the money in the world, the products that came out the other end, we were hungrier, we were more agile, we had to think differently, we had to think creatively about how we could, he used to say, we sell every bit of the cow but the moo. We would just figure out what assets do we have over here that we can move over here and put a different logo on it. And it was a great place to work. And we competed with people who had budgets that were way beyond ours, and it was more fun to me. So I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, Twyla Tharp said that, in her book, The Creative Habit. She said that she had one project that she had, it was unlimited time, unlimited budget, and it was terrible. And she had another project that was, she had 2 weeks to do it and hardly any money, and it was one of her best pieces of work because you have to have edges to rub up against. And I can't remember who this author was, but he was a travel writer, and he used to write, travel everywhere. And then they had a baby. He couldn't go anywhere. He's like, so let me see what's happening in my neighborhood, and so he started writing about what was right. It just works you just make it work for you.
I'm so glad you brought up Twyla Tharp's book, The Creative Habit, because I hadn't thought about that in a while. I love that book So if anybody is responding to what Trista's saying here today, check out that book because it really gives you some how-tos and ways to think about routine and things like that. Great book. The No Time to Be Timid manifesto is a terrific and thoughtful list. I really am a believer in the value of seeing constraints as opportunities. Having all the resources in the world does not guarantee success, and in fact, we can find countless examples of people, corporations, and other institutions who've turned their limitations into strengths with an optimistic focus on what they can do with what they have, not how they're constrained by what they're missing. And I was glad that Tricia mentioned Twyla Tharp, and it seems it wouldn't be a Blue Sky episode without a book recommendation, so here's this week's, The Creative Habit. It's a terrific work about how Twyla Tharp cultivates creativity as a discipline through habits, rituals, and embracing the process, including failure. Now back to the final segment of my Blue Sky conversation with Tricia Rose Burt. Okay, closely related to some of these other things we've talked about. Again, sounds oxymoronic to a lot of people. Failure is your friend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
I think it's because you just learn from failures. You just learn from it. And um I mean, I have a dear friend named Amy Grant. She's the singer, Grammy Award winning singer. Okay, Amy. We went to college together. Um we kind of reconnected. Yeah, so about 2012, she came to see my one woman show. She was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, so it was like, so we've been sort of attached at the hip since then. And she says, because I had worked very hard on a memoir, it did not get picked up. I was like, "What is? Oh, this is terrible." And she went, "Trisha, in our house, a no is as good as a yes. You just it just redirects you. If you have that, you just redirect. You're like, okay, it's not that direction. Or, okay, wait, I have to work harder to make that better. And so you're either getting the nudge that you're going in the wrong direction, or yourself, wait, it's not where it needs to be yet. I mean, it's you may not like it at the time. Who does? But you gotta just we're all gonna have way more misses than hits, I think. In the creative process is like, what happens if I do this? That's the main thing I learned in art school was asking the question, what happens if I do this? And I like that. I don't like that. I do like, I don't. What, just what happens if I do this? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I've heard people say, I think in the athletic context, I'm either winning or I'm learning. And you can learn from victories, but you learn so much more from defeats and failures. And I think approaching life knowing that is a huge path towards a better outlook because you're not expecting to bat 1,000, to use the baseball analogy. You're understanding that you're not going to. I get back to Ted Turner when he was beginning his ocean racing career. He was terrible, and he would lose all the time. He said, "Well, I'm not losing. I'm learning how to win." And that mindset can take you really far.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's, we get we're so programmed in this society not to fail. And it's exploration. It's you have to be ready to explore. And it's not always going to turn out, but okay, if I do it this way this time, it's exciting if you just kind of leave it wide open. You know?
And a lot of what you've described sound like individual pursuits, but your number 9 on your manifesto is there is courage in community.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah,
Tell me
yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, I live in the woods in New Hampshire by myself. And I mean, I need to talk to people so I don't know I'm crazy or I get that, the cheering on. I mean, we we all need to have fellow pilgrims on this journey. That it's tricky to be an artist. It's tricky to be a creative person. There's not a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, go do that." And so we sort of have, I have to be around folks who can be my champions, who don't think I'm crazy, I mean, I have dear friends that I have known forever, and they're kind of like, What do you do for a living? Like, what is that?" And they're cheering me on, but they don't know what it's like, in the process of it. For me to be able to talk to somebody who understands the process is, oh God, it's worth everything. It's worth everything.
Right. And I imagine you run into obstacles and then you talk to somebody else who's had the same obstacles. You go, oh, it's not me. Oh, it's not me. And so what did you do to get around? Oh, that's a great idea. When I was asked to write a book, my wife went and bought me books about how to write a book. And all of a sudden you realize I'm not the only writer who looks at the blank screen and freaks out, or I'm not the only writer who has experienced XYZ. It's a huge lift because you think, oh, I'm not good at this. And you realize, oh my gosh, Stephen King has these anxieties.
Absolutely.
Well, that helps.
It's like, there's a comedian I interviewed for my podcast, and she had been doing some stand up and she just felt so miserable. And so she quit doing it. And then she saw a Jerry Seinfeld documentary and she was like, oh, wait, you're supposed to feel miserable. And she just didn't know. She thought it was just her that was feeling. And that's why when you talk in community, it's like, oh, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I'm
Totally.
right where I'm supposed to be.
Well, and stand-up comedy is an interesting example, and art is a form of art, and all forms of art are this way. I think athletics can be this way, where when we see people who are quote unquote good at it or quote unquote successful, Jerry Seinfeld is one of my favorite examples. You think, oh, they just got it. They're just gifted. Jerry Seinfeld works so flipping hard, almost obsessively. He's still doing stand-up. I just saw his latest tour list. He's going to be in Bangor, Maine this summer doing stand-up. The guy's got more money than you could ever want. He's driven to do this. He's got folders and files and notes. The best, most gifted athletes who make it to the top level work as hard or harder than anybody else. And so I think when people hear that you've switched careers and you're in art, they think you're just kind of playing around. Some of them, right? Oh, that must be fun. It's like, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. It's a real, yeah. Yeah. It is so hard. I mean, and I will tell you the thing I've worked so hard on is the podcast. No one knows how much work is involved in a podcast.
Thank you. It's true.
Oh, listen. Hats off to you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
It is unbelievable. I mean, the first season I did my podcast, I was like, what is happening? I'm a smart person. I am unhinged. I just couldn't I mean, there were so many moving parts. I had a creative coach say, Tricia, doing it the first season of a podcast is like putting the wings on the airplane as it's going down the runway and getting your pilot's license at the same time. And I was like, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So despite all of these challenges and obstacles, your number 10 in your manifesto is make art now.
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, the world is a much better place if we know your story, if we hear your story, if you're putting beauty in it, if you're putting just, we just, that's what's going to save us, man. I mean, I am, it's art, it's stories, it's music. That's what's going to keep us all afloat, and I am so passionate about story because, um, you cannot demonize someone once you hear their story. You may not like them, but you cannot demonize them. You will have a sense of why they're making the choices that they're making. And so stories create empathy, stories create connection. It's vital. Storytelling is vital. Music. We're just so moved by music. We're so moved if you're sitting in a theater and you see it's like that's me up there. This is how we connect. This is how we're human is through the arts and story. This is it, man. And so and it doesn't, it's like, I'm not an artist. You just can't think of art with a big A or creativity with a big C. It's like, did you make a nice meal today and connect with your family? What is it? Just what can you put out there that's making something, making conversation, what is it that you can make and put out there that just makes just moves us all a little more forward.
Well, I love all of that. I agree with you on storytelling, and I am so glad I had the chance to have you tell at least part of your story on the Blue Sky podcast. I encourage people to check out your work. It's all over the internet, The Moth. You're an amazing storyteller, and I'm so glad you're doing this work for other people as well and spreading this message. It's terrific. Yeah, and check out the No Time to Be Timid podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
And be so supportive of Bill because he's working very hard on this podcast.
Yes.
It takes way more than you know, listeners. Way more than you know.
There, thank you so much. And thank you for this time today. I really appreciate it. You're a great guest, and I look forward to following your work going forward.
Thanks so much.
Take care. At the Optimism Institute, we often say in one way or another that we're going to have more misses than hits. And Tricia makes the important point that focusing on the process rather than the outcomes will help us persevere. And so will embracing community and finding courage by connecting with others. I experienced this myself when Tricia described that a weekly podcast is a lot of work. Indeed, it is. But in this particular creative practice, the work I do is truly a joy, and my well is full. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky episode with Tricia Rose Burt. Before you go, we'd appreciate you leaving us a rating or review, and hope you'll consider subscribing to our podcast to be sure you don't miss any future episodes. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. And all graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. And that's Crush with a K if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.